This is Sportish.
Do it better.
This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish. This is Sportish.
This is Sportish. It's a show ostensibly about sports that we started during the global sports shutdown. I'm Geoff Brault alongside Dr. Quie Strudler, runs the School of Communication and Media, Montclair State University. Big shout out to our producer, Mike Wallace. Before we get into recording this episode for you, I feel like we got to take you behind the curtain a little bit because, you know, I'm sure you can tell that we, like many programs now, are filming remotely. We're both inside of our respective homes. I don't have a lot of challenges, really. I fire up the same setup every week, pretty quiet in my house. I got this little setup in my office, which I've turned into a television studio. A few more challenges, though, for Quie Strudler. And let me tell you, you need three things to do this show. You need your headphones to connect, you need your microphone to be on, and you need the people you live with to shut up. And you're 0 for 3. You're 0 for 3 as we start this episode.
I'm having a little bit. So here's the problem. All right. So yes, we've had a microphone issue. We've had some earphone issues. I did not know that the Bluetooth worked through the ceiling. So you can connect to other devices in your house without knowing. And then you have to find said devices to disconnect. That's A. The problem with the kids is a couple problems. One is they got all day to go outside, get some exercise. What do? They wait. They wait and they wait. And then they're like, oh, we're going to go ride a stationary bike in the gym, which, by the way, is code speak for watch television. So they're in there, you know, making all kinds of noise. And then they finally go upstairs and they start screaming and yelling at each other. And you know what's not a good look for the show? When you ask me a question, I say, hold on. Sloan, shut it. It's not a good look for the show because then that becomes we're having two conversations now, right? So it is difficult. Look, this is my sanctuary, right? This is the studio. Unfortunately, the studio runs into the rest of the house, right? It's as if ESPN shares a space with, say, like a Wendy's.
All right, look, so we got a lot to talk about on this program. Biggest college football game of the year last weekend, Clemson, Notre Dame. Big win for Quie Strudler. Florida beats Georgia in this year, the world's most average-sized cocktail party. There are new COVID outbreaks in the SEC. The NFL is getting real serious about their COVID penalties now that teams are past their bye weeks. NCAA basketball is starting to do what happened to football a few weeks before it started, which just sputters and sputters and sputters, and you wonder if it's going to get to the start line. But we would be remiss if we didn't touch on not only the biggest story from last week, maybe the biggest story of my lifetime. It could be the favorite news item that has ever crossed my transom. 4 words, 4 seasons, total landscaping. If you haven't followed...
Everyone's heard of this now.
Yeah, but they might not have. They might not. We can't be certain about that. We did an entire episode last week about the election on the premise that people had no idea an election was going on. So assuming we're talking to the same audience, do yourself a favor and Google 4 seasons total landscaping, because Keith, it is my favorite story of all time.
Sure. And as you know, of course, the president decided to have his legal team led by Rudy Giuliani hold a post-election press conference, essentially to lay out the case that the election was stolen from him. And he would do this in the Philadelphia area, your hometown, which, you know, he alleged was essentially the site of the crime. And the announcement seemed to indicate that this would be held at the Four Seasons in Philadelphia, which is a place which we would like to frequent, obviously, an upscale hotel, the kind of setting you would expect for something of this magnitude. It turns out it was held at the Four Seasons in Philadelphia. Unfortunately, for all that had to cover it, it was Four Seasons Landscaping, which is a basically located. It's a landscaping business. It's just kind of the home of the landscaping business, where whoever picked up the phone would be like, yeah, I need my lawn mowed. I'd like to get on the service. I need my driveway plowed. I'm thinking about putting in some trellising, whatever it is. And that's in an industrial park on the outside of town, located in between. I know on one side was an adult bookstore.
Yes. And on the other side was a crematorium. None of that is a joke or made up in any way. Who would have thought that Rudy Giuliani, and again, this is not a politics show, who would have thought that Rudy Giuliani's most embarrassing moment this month wouldn't be the time he was apparently about to have sex with a 15-year-old in Borat 2? That is now his second most embarrassing moment caught on camera just this month. Really setting the bar high there.
So do you think, I know everyone's talking about this, we're not breaking any new ground.
No.
It does not seem like this was an accident. It seems like this. I know the theory is that there's some intern called there, like I said, but it does seem as though this was the plan all along. This was not a Spinal Tap. And by the way, if you've not seen Spinal Tap and you've got nothing but spare time to kill, Spinal Tap is one of the greatest movies. The Stonehenge scene in Spinal Tap is kind of the case study for, hey, we read that wrong, right? When instead of having a 12-foot Stonehenge, they have a 12-inch Stonehenge come down from the sky. And of course, the most famous line, or a couple of famous lines, is we were about to have we had a Stonehenge that was that was about to be trampled by dwarfs. And of course, when the manager was having an argument, we said he showed them the napkin that Nigel wrote the 12 inches on, and they go, "We don't pay you to be as stupid as Nigel is." One of my favorite lines from that movie. If you're a Spinal Tap fan, we don't pay you to be as stupid as Nigel is. So, by the way, that is, let's be clear, because I know you've trampled all over Superbad, and more so Starsky and Hutch.
I have not trampled all over Superbad. I think Superbad's one of the funniest movies of the last 20 years. I will trample all over Starsky and Hutch, though.
Starsky and Hutch, by the way, if we're going to go back to that, it's just this series of skits sewn together. And by the way, those are
none of them are that funny. And none of them are that funny.
The hand towel one is hysterical.
No,
the thing where they do that, the dragon.
The fact that you even put that in the same breath as Superbad offends me.
But Spinal Tap, by the way, have you seen Spinal Tap?
Yes. Spinal Tap. It's hilarious.
It's an amazing movie. Yeah. It's Rob Reiner's, finest moment. It's an amazing movie. So, Rob Reiner, of course.
Yeah. That's why I like the Four Seasons Total Landscaping story so much, is because, one of my favorite TV shows of the last couple of years is Veep. And you look at something like the Four Seasons Total Landscaping thing, and it's just like Veep wouldn't come up with something that ridiculous, and it happened in real life. And gosh,
I think they meant to be there. Look, the way they had those things, the way that they blew them all up.
Kind of do too. I mean, because everybody thinks they just meant to book the Four Seasons Hotel, and they didn't, and Trump tweeted about it, so no one to say was wrong. But it doesn't seem like that's what happened. No. But also, no one has any explanation for why they went there in the first place. It's not like the business owners are massive Trump supporters or anything like that. No. They said we'd be welcome to any presidential candidate who wants to use our space. Literally, the owner of the business said they thought they wanted to use the space because it was off the street and it could be secured by a locked gate to protect their trucks. So they didn't even know why it was happening there.
Let me tell you what, if you're a Pennsylvania politician at this point, though, you're a fool to not launch your candidacy. Like, that should be a thing. Like, they should be the new Liberty Bell. Like, that should be like the road to the State House in Pennsylvania goes through Four Seasons Landscaping. By the way, have you considered buying a shirt from them? Because they're heavy in the merchandising game now.
I know they started it. And I respect them for doing that. And I'll be honest, I'd consider it. I really would.
I just don't know what is that. Am I making a statement by wearing it, or can I just be ironic? Can I just be kind of cool, hipster, ironic?
That's a great question. I think you got to let it breathe a little bit and find out. I think we got to find out a little bit more about it before we make that step.
Well, this is like when, one of my favorite Curb Your Enthusiasm episodes, when Larry David realizes he can get all the space he needs at a restaurant, or always get out of any kind of event he wants to if he wears a MAGA hat.
Yeah, it's similar, but we don't yet know which side of the spectrum Four Seasons Total Landscaping is on. Yeah, so
I see this being like a Williamsburg hipster thing, like at some point. Like, I feel like it might go that direction.
Yeah, it could, or it could go the complete other way. And that's why patience is required, which I know is not your strong suit. I mean, you were really struggling over the 3 or 4 days it took for them to call that election. You rode the roller coaster of emotions.
Well, can we look? We all know, and everyone has paid all sorts of gratitude to the election officials who were counting votes. We get it. Although, to be fair, people don't thank me every day for doing my job. I just want to point that out. I go to work every day. I'm not getting Stephen Colbert's not calling me out and telling me how great I am, right? I just want to point that out. But yes, they did their job. They did a great job. We appreciate it. I am a little confused why certain states seem to take so much time off. So was there not one state where they literally scheduled like an administrative day in the middle of this count?
It was the Pittsburgh area. They had to take a day off from counting. Now, there's a good reason for that. Again, this gets into the political weeds. They had a number of ballots that had irregularities. They weren't sure how to legally handle them, so they had to take a day off and figure out how to handle the ballots.
There was one legally.
That's not the funny version of the story. The funny version of the story is they took a day off in the middle of the vote counting. I get it,
But there was one I feel like in Nevada where they're like, well, this was look, we've had this day scheduled for 2 months. We had to move it once already. We have promised Sally her performance eval, and someone we're going to review the vending supplier list this time. I mean, I do feel like there was a point at which everyone in America was like, can we help you with this? Like, is there any way we can help you? And how is Nevada the slowest counting state in the country? How is that not?
Well, first
like
of all, Alaska would like a word. Now, to me, I understand. I feel it's just harder to count with the mittens on. So I think that's what's slowing them down in Alaska. I don't understand Nevada. I mean, that's just.
I mean, that's what they do. They count. That's all. There's not a single person that's counting there that, as you put it, this isn't a side hustle because they're really working at Caesar's Palace, right?
Before we move on to our first topic of our real show, do need to get you on record right now. Is what you do more important, less important, or equally as important as the vote counters?
Oh, I mean, vote counter, like one key Strudler to one vote counter.
Yeah. You were upset that they got thanked for doing a great job and nobody thanks you. So is your job more important, less important, or as important as the people that count the votes and protect American democracy?
Well, I protect a lot as well.
American democracy?
No, I mean, I wouldn't say American.
The fate of the free world, is that in your hands?
Education is the future. So
do you decide the most powerful man or woman in the world?
That is yet to be determined. That is yet to be determined. The decisions I make as a school director, as an administrator at a university, could impact the leadership of tomorrow. So I'll say this. See, there's no right answer, because if I say no, I'm not as important, I'm lying, right?
No, some would say you're not lying. Some would say that would be the one answer that wouldn't be a lie.
You know what? I'm gonna leave it to you, viewers. All thousands and thousands of you. Hit us up on Twitter at SportishPod. Let us know if you think my job is as important as a single vote counter. And I'm not talking about the last guy or girl in Pennsylvania, like, this is the winning vote, I got it. I'm talking about they might be in Alabama for all I know. I mean, this thing is like you could be 2 sheets to the wind in Alabama and still get this thing right. So, I mean, let's it's all right. So am I as important as a standard issue, pull name out of a hat, vote counter in the election? I'll go with yeah.
The answer is no. Clemson, Notre Dame, biggest college football game of the year last weekend, went to double overtime.
Yeah.
Lived up to the hype.
Yeah.
Exceptionally exciting game. Clemson probably right now still hanging on to the top 4 to get into the national championship playoff picture. Notre Dame now solidifies their standing as a member of the ACC.
Don't count out the Chanticleers. Do not count out the Chanticleers.
I am sadly counting out the Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. So obviously we have this wonderful college football game. Prime time pushes Dave Chappelle on Saturday Night Live back a couple minutes. And even that people seem to handle very well on a day in which a lot of people want to hear from Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, sure.
Myself included. But that said, great football game. And then they were coming onto the field in South Bend. So 11,000 fans in attendance, give or take. They were all, a very, very select few alumni or faculty members, majority students and family members of the players. And they emptied out onto the field in, of course, a COVID environment. We've talked a lot on this show about optics, and that was not good optics.
It was now, if there were 11,000 people in the stands, I would say 13,000 of them made it onto the field.
Yeah.
So there may have been some miscounting or some double counting at some point there. Yeah, it was a really bad look. By the way, is there a Vegas line on a team from South Carolina only one team from South Carolina is going to play in the college football playoffs, and it's not Clemson and it's not USC? Is there a line on that?
Well, it's not USC. So my guess is there isn't a line on that. But if you call and ask, I bet they'll give you odds.
I mean, look, you want to tell me the Chanticleers don't have a shot at being in there? All right.
Yes, I do.
By the way, I'm going to just keep on talking. I got to plug in my computer. We're going to do some housekeeping while we do this. So.
Okay. So now wait, are you having a technical difficulty with with another bit of technology? And now Keith is gone. He's just gone completely.
My computer cord fell out, and so now I'm taking care of that. Is that a problem?
Is there a reason that you weren't prepared? This is a very attractive shot. Is there a reason that you weren't prepared to do the show tonight?
I'm prepared, but I was working. I'm not sitting around like you are waiting to fix my toilet, which is exactly what you're doing.
It is. I'd be getting a new toilet handle right now if I wasn't doing this show with you. So your headphones didn't work, your microphone didn't work, your house wasn't quiet, and now your computer wasn't plugged in. So you took you could for 4.
You can talk to the other people in the house. If you want to have a conversation with the rest of the Strudler household, you can talk to them about the volume level in the household. I'll take the power. The power's on me. That's my fault.
Here's what the Notre Dame field storming has indicated to me. You once said on this show something that I thought was very prescient. Pandemics end when people decide they end. The coronavirus pandemic is not over. However, what I do believe is now clearly over, and it is the world of sports, in my opinion, that is bearing this out more than anywhere else in our society. People will no longer deny themselves pleasure because of the coronavirus. If there's something people want to do, they are going to do it, regardless of the fact that there is a pandemic going on.
I mean, that might be look, it has been a long run. So part of the problem right now is that we have been in this since, early March of this year. So it has been, and I think if you remember correctly, and I remember this quite vividly, my kids got sent home from school and they literally were talking about, oh, you'll be back in 2 weeks. Now, obviously that was foolish to even consider that, but I think that's how a lot of people were thinking about this. I don't think anyone was thinking when they canceled the college basketball playoffs last year that we might not be able to do a college basketball playoffs next year. I mean, it was inconceivable. It was inconceivable that we wouldn't have a real Christmas holiday season, that you couldn't do that.
You wouldn't be able to
travel.
see grandma on Thanksgiving.
No. Yeah. I mean, there, you want to talk about a Vegas line. You could have gotten, now Fauci would have bet the farm on that, but for the most part, you couldn't have conceived that. So I think the fatigue is very real. And we are dealing with college students who do stupid stuff all the time. So, so you are dealing kind of in the extreme of this. Look, I think Dabo Sweeney kind of summed it up a little bit when they said, hey, do you mind the fact that they were storming the field? He's like, nah, college kids. So I think that kind of exemplifies this is, as much as college students are going to be very hard to contain in an environment like this, the reality is it's a top-down initiative. The leadership has to set the tone. Not to be lost on this, and we all know this, the president of Notre Dame contracted the virus when he went to the Amy Coney Barrett, event at the White House without a mask, everyone crammed in. So you already have kind of hypocrisy at the highest level of the university. So even when he basically encouraged people or said, hey, let's all be careful, and then kind of condemned it on the back end of this, you can't take any of this seriously. So I would suggest that as soon as the universities, look, you and I agree, we don't mind that they're playing football, right? If there's a way to do it, play the game. We're not like that. Once you start letting fans into the stands and you start loosening the strings, this is there is no way to stop it. That's my opinion.
I agree. It's gone too far. And what we have now is COVID theater. It is protocol theater. That is what we're doing. Yeah. All of the president of Notre Dame my God, this missive that he sent.
Am I allowed to drink? Am I allowed to drink here because I'm not using
I'm insulted you're not using the Sportish mug, but yes, I would prefer that you stay hydrated as opposed to pass out from thirst.
Okay, so I'm allowed to. I can do this, right? All right.
Yeah, I'm okay with it. The hypocrisy in Reverend Jenkins' email to students is dripping. My favorite line was that he said that there is a zero tolerance policy for any gatherings on or off campus that do not comply with the school's health and safety guidelines. They're the ones hosting the gathering. The school hosted the gathering by having 11,000 people in their football stadium. It's just this whole thing. And I mean, we've seen this time and time again. It's rules for thee, but not for me. It's, hey, look, 11,000 people in the football stadium, fine. 10 people at a Halloween party, how dare you? You're no longer allowed to register for classes. Like they are passing the buck on to the students. They're saying you are acting irresponsibly. The people that are acting irresponsibly are the people that are letting 11,000 people into this football game. I think two things could have happened at that Clemson Notre Dame game. They could have played, and there should have been no one there. Those two things could have happened, and we wouldn't have had any of this trouble.
I agree. And I think, this was once, it was an inch and it became a mile, and now it's 11,000 people on the field. I still am not fully clear on why that decision was made to allow students into the stands. I am.
I'll let
I
you
don't
know.
think
You
it's
wanna know why?
It's enrollment. It's enrollment.
No.
Enrollment.
No. I mean, I'm sure. I mean,
it's enrollment.
If you get down the list, I'm sure that's what it is. But here's what it is. They don't care. They don't care.
You really think that's?
I absolutely do.
Well, I don't think Dabo Sweeney cares. I don't think Dabo Sweeney cares. But you don't think that the University Health Center cares?
Nope. Oh, the University Health Center might care, but any of the people that have the power to make the decisions do not care. They have looked at both sides and they go, "This is fine."
It's not a financial decision in the regard that because they're probably not even paying for tickets. These are students. They're probably going for free. I mean, most of these big universities, it's a nominal fee at best. You're paying $25 for the year or $25 for ticket. They don't make money off this. The kind of security they have to hire anyway. It doesn't pay to have fans at a stadium until you're getting a real fan number. And they're probably not selling much in terms of concessions anyway. So the money's not really there. And I don't think it matters that much for optics. I don't think this is if we have fans in the stands, it'll make the game seem more exciting. That game was going to be exciting either way. And we've seen that we can kind of make a game exciting by using all kinds of, special effects. I think this is my, working at a university where you kind of think every day about making sure that students don't abandon campus, right? And the most important thing in universities right now, it's not, I think this is one of the red herrings, it's not whether or not you can hold classes in person or not. That's something we think about every day. And it's like, how can we get more classes? But what it really comes down to, and we're getting really into the weeds, but it ties very heavily to college athletics, is can we keep our dorms filled? Right. And this is, I mean, there's some weird drivers of college athletics. Like college athletics they don't exist, they don't exist completely separate from the university. They are part and parcel. So they're not in a vacuum. So it's not whether or not you're selling a TV contract. If your students abandon the dorms and go home because they're all taking virtual classes, you have building space and dining facilities and all these contracts that you're paying for either way. It's kind of like if you own a home that you were using for Airbnb and you can't fill that up, you are paying that rent and those taxes either way. So you got to fill it up. That's the case right now in a lot of universities. So I'm thinking, particularly as I'm sure Notre Dame, as most of these universities have at least a plurality, if not a vast majority in some cases, all of their courses online, there are a lot of students that could go home. What's one thing that keeps them from going home? Football. Party it up with football. So you get 11,000. I mean, Notre Dame's not that big. That's a good percentage, if not the majority of the undergraduate student body at that game at that point. And so honestly, that's one reason they stick around. Don't take a gap year. Don't take a year off. I think that's driving a lot of this in a lot of these campuses already. So, but you're right. And it's a financial decision. I don't think it's that they don't care. I think they care, but I think
they obviously don't care enough.
Care enough. They don't care as much as they care about, about not losing a ton of money. And I think for some of these, now look, these concerns are real. As we know, Clemson just this week, almost like in response to the loss to Notre Dame, they decided to take the loss out on the men's track and field and cross country program by literally announcing.
They did that before they lost, but
Oh, did they? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So they have now they're taking out their financial challenges on the men's track and field and cross. And in the ACC, that's big time track and field. There are some very good programs. And Clemson, I don't know what the state of the program is now. They have in past had some incredible distance running programs. They just cut that. And so the crises are real. And some of these schools, look, I know at Florida, one of my alma maters, they're all a school that does not want for students at this point. It's very hard to get in to the undergraduate and graduate programs at Florida. I mean, it's really difficult, and they can get as many students as they want. They're still dealing with furloughs and layoffs right now. And so I just think if you can't keep those dorms filled, you're underwater. And so I think that's driving some of it. They're trying to create a campus environment that keeps people wanting to stay there.
Sure. Which is fine if you come out and say that. It's the hypocrisy, and it's what I believe is the lying that gets me. I mean, you read what the Notre Dame athletic director said after the game. He's like, oh, we'll reevaluate our policies. We'll see. We certainly would have preferred they not come onto the field. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you would have. But you didn't do anything before the game to stop it. Brian Kelly knew it could happen. The Notre Dame head coach told his players that if we win, and it's close, this is probably going to happen. So maybe get off the field. There's no reason they couldn't have put more emphasis on not storming prior to the game. Now, what you can't do in any sense is people are like, well, why isn't there security stopping the kids? That's the worst thing you can do. That's how you get into a real riot and people get hurt. I mean, once the mass of humanity starts coming onto the field, you let them go. You don't put any of this on stadium security. It's, to me, all on the administration at Notre Dame for not making it known that if you do this, there will be severe penalties. Whereas what they did was allow it to happen, get it on television, and then tell everyone retroactively that they acted so irresponsibly that they're the ones at fault for this terrible thing that was seen all over television that was, in my opinion, fully sanctioned by the university. And
who
so, look, if it's all about what you say, if it's all about keeping kids on campus and it's all about preserving jobs and the bottom line, that's a fine argument. Make that argument instead of this theater that you're giving us every week about how seriously you're taking it and how much you care and how much it's all about health and safety when it isn't.
Sure. Right now, they're concerned about one thing and one thing only, and that's Pfizer just said 90% effectiveness. Because that may be one of the few things that saves the some of these universities from going under. Who would have thought, first of all, of Notre Dame and Clemson, those two teams playing, that Notre Dame would be the one accused of being more irresponsible when it comes to COVID, because Clemson has been a national leader. It's almost harder to not have COVID than to have COVID as a Clemson student at this point. The positivity rate, they shouldn't even talk about positivity rate. They should start measuring negativity rate, because that's really it's but B, who would have thought of the two premier games that day, the Clemson Notre Dame game, and of course the world's, as you like to say, the most mid-sized cocktail party
this year.
That the Florida Georgia one would be the more responsible of
I know. I tell you, I would have not have taken that bet.
Talk about places where they really don't care about COVID.
Jacksonville is that place, but they seem to act okay. Even when I looked at the stands in that stadium, I was like, this actually isn't as bad as I've seen in some other SEC.
Yeah. Well, a neutral, it's a neutral field. And so neutral field does a lot to like the Texas, one of the most friendly, like the Texas Oklahoma game is friendly. I always find that those, and I wish they did more of those. The neutral field games, I know the campuses hate them because they lose revenue, but they're a lot of fun. They tend to kind of bring the temperature down a little bit, even though you'd assume it would be the opposite because they're on. It actually turns into a giant party. I mean, the Texas Oklahoma game it's a party. So, but yeah, this was not. It was not a good weekend. It was not a good look, and it should have been a premier weekend because what the powers that be in college football want right now is to not repeat Alabama Clemson. That is what they'd like to see not happen again, right? And it looks like it's
are still in the conversation.
Absolutely, as are the Chanticleers, of course, as we know.
They are not. They are not. I know you really like saying Chanticleers, which, by the way, if you don't know, is a singing rooster. It's a singing rooster. That's the chant. Chant is French for sing.
But I thought it was also a badass fierce rooster, like a claw, like
well, sure. You don't think a rooster that's out there being a tenor is also gonna have a little edge to it? That's not what roosters want to be doing.
But I thought it was like the biggest, baddest rooster in the barn. That's what I thought.
I don't know if that's correct. I don't know.
Well, that's what the players for Coastal Carolina seem to believe. I don't know if if they're like, guys, this is not a tap dancing rooster. This is a mean rooster.
What might stand in the way of Alabama getting back into the national championship game Is Alabama not finishing its season? LSU Alabama's on the brink this week. We're recording this on Monday evening. We don't know what's going to happen with LSU Alabama, but there have been a number of positive tests in the LSU program. Reports are that they are perilously close to not having the 53 scholarship players required to be able to play a game this weekend. Auburn, Mississippi State has already been canceled in the SEC, and Arkansas head coach Sam Pittman has tested positive for COVID-19. So as cases go way up in the wintertime, and they are just about everywhere in the country, they are going way up. It's becoming harder and harder for these games to be played under the protocols that were set forth at the beginning of the season. I think we are trending, I don't want to say probably, but I think we are likely trending to schools not finishing their entire schedule. They're going to run out of possible dates you can reschedule, and we're not going to have teams playing an entire season, and we're going to have to figure out how to deal with that, because I don't think anyone's going to stop.
Yeah. Well, I would say, as I mentioned a little bit earlier before the show, it's about time we just have Alabama and Florida play for the SEC championship and have that team play Ohio State and call it a year, because that's kind of where we're heading at this point. I agree. I think some teams may opt out. I think you might see some Pac-12 teams say, if it's not going well, I mean, Wisconsin can barely, barely get in.
Yeah. And Utah in the Pac-12, I mean, Utah might not even get off the ground.
and I'm surprised because Ed Ogeron seemed to indicate that everyone on the team had already had COVID. Yeah. So I'm surprised they're still in this morass. And LSU, I'm assuming, has a roster of about 300 players. They're like Nebraska in the 80s. And so I'm a little surprised that they're unable to get their 53 scholarship kids out there. But I agree. I think you'll start to see some of these programs start to step sideways. And what's interesting is the schools, the South seems to be hit the hardest. The SEC, now this should be where it's the easiest to keep this at bay, because your temperature's warmer, you're able to do much more outside. I'd be much more concerned, like if I'm Rutgers and Michigan and Ohio State, I'm starting to wonder, because it's getting colder and colder. We'll see. We'll see if they finish. I do think they are going to find a way to play a national championship or to have a playoff series. I could be wrong on that. It might be the last four standing.
I don't think you're wrong.
At which point the Chanticleers start to look good again.
I don't think you're wrong about
that. How about Liberty, by the way?
Slightest.
How about Liberty?
Liberty?
This is the craziest. So that's the other thing, because you never know what teams are really full strength. You never know their motivation at this point. It's not a normal year. These games, I mean, Liberty, Houston Baptist, maybe it's just the really religious schools. That's what it is. Maybe evangelical schools have some kind of edge this year. Maybe God is telling us something, but because they're legit. Like, do not walk in there and start dancing. Like, that is a legit place. But I just think there's so much ambiguity. And as long as we're to circle back to Clemson, do you play again if you're Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah.
Do you? Why?
Because he wants to win a national championship.
He's already won a national championship, and
it's better than one national championship.
A lot of money, getting drafted first in the NFL. Although not this year.
But see, if that's the argument, and I mean, that is the argument, but if that's the reasoning, why play the season at all?
Sure. But I guess the reality is they still are very much alive in the national championship race. Although it's going to be harder to absorb multiple losses this year because there's no interconference play, which is where you often pile up some of your tough losses because you're playing against a really good team from another conference. So, it will be tougher. I think there's going to be a team out of the SEC. There's going to be a team out of the Big Ten. There's going to be Notre Dame can write their way into it. So there's three teams.
But what's weird about this year is there might not be a team out of the Big Ten. There might not be. They're going to play less games. And if there's not a dominant force, right? If Ohio State trips up, there might not be. The four teams might come out of the pool of
Northwestern's looking pretty good.
That played the whole way.
Indiana.
And really anyone but.
Is this turning into a sports show? Is this turning into a sports show? Are we sports show hosts right now?
I mean, look. If you go undefeated in the SEC, if you win the SEC championship game, you're in the top four, right? Notre Dame, if they don't lose, if they win out, they're going to be there too.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's going to come down to who finishes. And who's got the 0 on the back end of their record?
BYU, Cincinnati, as it was put this weekend, the Alabama of the American.
Boy, is that a compliment?
I don't know.
Like, because I mean, is there any other context in life where being the Alabama of something is considered a positive?
They don't. Because as you know, as you say this, as a Pennsylvanian, we often refer to the space between Pittsburgh and Philadelphia as the Alabama of the North.
Correct.
I don't think that's
true.
Endearingly. I don't think that's
very
a high
common.
compliment.
In Pennsylvania, they call it Pennsyltucky. That's the middle, the big soft middle.
By the way, with all props and due respect to all our Kentuckians who are enjoying the program, for which it's probably an hour earlier. You might be I don't even know. Is that Central Time Zone? Kentucky's not north or south. It's Central. Are you sure?
Yeah,
I feel like that's
Central.
one of those states that can have a line through it.
It could. I'm not entirely sure. I know that when I went to Lexington, it's Central. So Lexington is Central.
Okay, well then most of it is. And what I mean, you got Lexington and Louisville, and I mean, yeah.
I think that's about it. Yeah, I really do. Cincinnati's almost in Kentucky. It's close.
That's true. The airport.
Like
the airport's right up there. Yeah.
Right there. Yeah.
Yeah. So all right. So you play if you're Trevor Lawrence. That's fine.
I think so. You wouldn't?
I mean, at some point, look, you've had a rough year. You had COVID. Although he didn't say. I also love, by the way, and I find this fascinating, that with the athletes, they get COVID, and it's not like, I hope they're okay. Are they gonna? It's like, well, they've got 7 days left. They've got it. Like it's almost as if. And maybe I'm missing. I know that we have. I believe one athlete has actually died. If I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah.
But with that aside, we almost, when we watch these cases, and some of these teams have real high positivity rates. You know, you got a third of your team that's had it. It seems like they're like, all right, they've got it. They got to sit for a week, and then they come back and play.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem as if they are kind of taking time to recover, or as if with all, that they have any long-lasting ramifications. I don't know if that's true or not. Obviously, I've not talked to the team doctor, but it's an interesting kind of sidebar to this, that it doesn't seem as if the issue is that they're all getting COVID and they're all now morbidly ill, or they're all weak and they can't recover. They get it. And next thing you know, like Trevor Lawrence was on the sideline, looked like he was ready to play. And I'm sure he was.
I imagine, and again, I did not speak with Trevor Lawrence about this or any of his doctors. I imagine that he felt mild symptoms at worst. Yeah. So he was probably fine. Like, I mean, just because you test positive doesn't mean you're sick. And that, honestly, is part of the reason why these people no longer care about COVID. And it's just getting very frustrating that they are all acting like they care. That's, again, the protocol theater to me. They don't really care. Somebody catches a positive test. The number one concern is not for their safety. I mean, maybe it is if somebody feels bad, but if they don't feel bad, if somebody tests positive and like, I feel great, the number one concern is how fast can we get you out of these protocols that we've created?
Whenever they say they're suffering mild symptoms, see, I don't know, because look, in the context of COVID, because COVID was often, kind of phrased in the severe symptoms are hospitalization, respirators, and death. So when they said mild symptoms, like if I were sick, right, and I had COVID and I was like flu-like, and someone was like, hey, how's Keith feeling, or how are you feeling? I would say, I'm about to die.
Yes,
I would say,
yes,
even if they're like, you're fine, just recover at home, you don't need to come to the doctor, you're fine. They would describe me as having mild symptoms. I would want to repunge that record. I would want it to be known that I feel really, really crappy and I'm uncomfortable. Like, I feel like sometimes we use the word mild symptoms in a way that I would be uncomfortable with, because I'd want to know, I'd want people to know, like when I had the flu on our awful trip to the Final Four.
It wasn't awful for me. I had a great time. So did Mike Wallace.
You would describe that probably as mild symptoms. I describe that as a near-death experience where I believe I talked to Jesus, who is not my God, but was still there.
The desert, to be fair, though, the desert will do that to you. A couple days in the desert and, your mind starts playing tricks on you.
Do you see what I did there, by the way? I just made a transition to college basketball. Do you see how I did that?
Yeah. One of the college basketball Jesuses, Tom Izzo, has tested positive. I don't know what the plural form is there.
Hold on.
Okay, holding.
Siri, what is the positive of Jesus? Oh, no. Positive, plural. Let's try this again.
Okay, let's
Jesus,
try it again.
What is the plural of...
No, I called the phone Jesus. Which, to be fair, is a Freudian slip that is probably quite
Forget
accurate.
it. No one knows. No one.
I mean, I assume it's Jesus's, like a group of Jesus,
Well,
multiple Jesuses.
Like it was like the Elvises in Las Vegas.
Right. But I mean, are we sure that's not Elvi? Because isn't a group of elves Elvi?
Oh, I don't know.
I'm going into my
elves. No, those would be elves. Those
elves?
Would be
Are you sure they're not Elvi?
Yeah. No, they're elves.
So
those are elves.
It's not Jesus.
To be fair, I'm guessing that the mere suggestion that there are multiple Jesuses is highly counter to the entire kind of.
Yeah, but we don't know.
But I'm saying that it's probably never been. I'm sure if I went to the Pope and I was like, "Hey, Pope, give me multiples of Jesus," he'd slap me across the mouth, right?
There've been multiple popes. I mean, none of us were around back then. How do we know how the process works? There could be a whole electoral college set up.
Do you think this is like Chewbacca, where we assume there was just one Wookiee because that was the only one we saw, and then when he went back to the Wookiee planet, you're like, wait a minute, there's tons of.
Yes. By the way, the Wookiee planet is Kashyyyk. Kashyyyk is the Wookiee planet.
But like when that scene happened, I'm like, wait a minute, there's tons of Chewbaccas. I thought he was the only one.
Right? Nope.
There's tons of this whole planet of Wookiees. Yeah. So yes, we're in college basketball now.
Yeah.
And Jesus talk. religious television.
So Tom Izzo's got the virus. He's got the coronavirus. And this, by the way, is to me where the concern needs to lie. It's not so much in the 21-year-old athlete testing positive. It's in the folks that are Tom Izzo's age that are around the 21-year-old athlete. And it's not just one or two people. If you look around college athletic departments, if you look around college campuses, there are a fair number of people in what smart folks are describing as higher risk populations that coexist with these otherwise healthy 21-year-old athletes. And to me, it's those people that you got to protect. And if you stop caring about the protocols, those are the people who are at risk. And Tom Izzo testing positive is way more dangerous than Trevor Lawrence testing positive.
Absolutely. My guess is
it just is.
Sure, of course. My guess is Tom Izzo is, and this is not fair because I don't know, is, I would guess, partially to blame. I'm guessing allowed himself to be, and I don't know, that's not fair, but very likely was in a higher risk situation where he may have been practicing with his team. You know, I've seen way too many coaches pull their masks down, and maybe that is unfair. But it does seem as though, I don't know that they're always keeping their 6 feet when they're getting up into a player's mug, telling him how he felt about the last play. Yeah. And so I who knows? It's going to be challenging. Look, this college, if you think college football season is nuts right now, and it is, this college basketball season, if it gets off the ground, is going to be bananas. If you look at the polls that just came out, it doesn't even make sense. I mean, Duke and Kentucky are at 9 and 10. Which in a normal world, you would say that's impossible. 1 is Gonzaga, 2 is Baylor, right? As you point out, 5 was Iowa. You have teams that are not normally in kind of the elite. And I know Baylor's got a good team. Gonzaga always has a good team. But there could be this is one of those cases where I think a lot of basketball players could sit out. If this thing seems like it's going south, because why would you play you don't have to do it if you're a basketball player. And the odds, unlike football, the odds of winning a college basketball championship are infinitesimal, right? If you play for Alabama or Clemson, you're like, I got about a 20% chance if I roll through this thing. If you play for Duke, you still have a 6% chance, right? And then you go down the line from there. If you play for Florida, you got a 0.5% chance. If you're a superstar right now, what are you playing? I could see this actually being, if they play, I could totally see this being the year of the mid-major because they're going to play.
Maybe. I mean, mid-majors have less to lose, just like we saw with football, with why the entire FCS shut it down. You know, it's just, there's not that much in there for them. And especially this year, where all of the schedule changes have come out, all the teams that are backing out of these multi-team events, all the teams that have already had to have shutdowns because of positive tests just during practice, right? There's going to be a lot of mid-major schools, by the way, that haven't started testing yet because they can't afford it.
Yeah.
So they're going to start testing, and then we're going to find more virus. Now, that doesn't mean that the testing is the reason the virus was there. I feel like stupid that we even have to explain that, but we do. Just because you do more testing doesn't mean you find more virus. It just means you identify more virus. There is a difference there, by the way. Some people struggle to put that together, and that's bothered me for weeks. And then
Glad you were able to get that off your chest.
Yes, it really does. This is like a cathartic week where you can just finally let everything go.
What a great week, though. By the way, it was sunny. I mean, it was a great weekend. 70 plus degrees in the Northeast. I'm sure it's because everyone's using aerosol cans at this point, but it was a great weekend.
You're right about college basketball this season being awfully strange. And I knew it from the time the NCAA came out and said, hey, look, let's all do our best to get to 26, 28 games. We need you to get to 13. When they set 13 as the number to be postseason eligible, that is your signal that this is going to be wild, that there are going to be cancellations all over the map. There are going to be pauses all over the map. There's 359, somewhere in that range at last check.
Well,
and across the country, and only a few of them said they're not playing.
Going down.
A few so far in the Division One ranks. I highly doubt every team's going to make it to the finish line. If every team starts, I just don't think it's going to happen.
The challenge is going to be the conferences are going to need them. It's kind of like if you're in for a dime, you're in for a dollar kind of thing. Yep. So yes, I agree that if you're having a lousy season and you're FIU or whoever you are, you want to call it a day, right? And that's a school that in a high risk area could easily, and I just picked that randomly, but that's the kind of school that could be going, they could be 2-4, 2-6 and know the season's over and want to drop out. If they do that, they are going to put pressure on the rest of their conference, which is going to throw the whole thing out of whack. And you got to get a team in the tournament. So who knows? Who knows how I think there might be some conferences that don't get off the ground. I don't think the Ivies are playing. I don't know that the Patriots going to play. I mean, I think you're going to start to see some of the Northeastern conferences call it. And look, we're hearing, by the time you hear this, governor of New Jersey will have already put in some more stringent regulations in place. A lot of that has to do, they're letting the colleges do what they want, but they are restricting interstate play for clubs and high schools. We're inching closer to, you might be allowed to play, but the governor might be like, you're going to have to go through so many hoops. I don't know that we make it there. I don't know that it doesn't turn into the same thing where 50 or 60 or 70 teams decide to have a season and they play for a championship and everyone else says, screw it. I mean, it's not worth it.
It could be that the Power Fives go and all of the smaller leagues don't.
Which is why now, if you're one of the small conferences that sticks in it, you're like, you're like the Sun Belt. You're like, we're going to stick a couple teams in the tournament this year.
We got about 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks.
The tournament is
start of the season.
If we get to the tournament, it will be the nuttiest, craziest thing that we have ever seen. Although, just remember, 90% effectiveness. And I am first in line. I want to close with this. Who's more essential than me?
I want to close with this. Hundreds of thousands of people. That's all for this edition of Sportish. We got to thank our producer, Mike Wallace. He's Dr. Quie Strudler. My name is Geoff Brault. Thanks for joining us on For the Fans. Podcasts available wherever they are sold on Thursday. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Sportish. See you next time.